Good morning, everyone. Presenting myself as a reporter number 1, and I am Malika Joy, Orlanda, to introduce our topic. It is about making class count. According to Eric Wright, that class is defined by private ownership of the means of production, work in analytical Marxism. In contrast, Daniel Bell contends that class is a product of industrial capitalism, which is not a major component in all cultures. In 1848, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels proclaimed class to be the primary social structure, since Weber introduced the idea of class beyond the means of production, including ownership of investment property, market positions, and knowledge. Many things have altered. In addition, Weber added status, including gender and race, and the middle class. Eric Orlin Wright, born in 1947 in California. He was a highly motivated thinker who earned his doctorate from the University of California in the year 1976. He also protest group that pushed for a more democratic approach to education and had an impact on his early schooling. Also, collective intellectual and social justice participation defined Wright's career. He also founded the NBMG, known as No Bullshit Marxism Group, in the year 1979, with the goal of concentrating on the principles of Marxism. Every September, this group, also called the September Group, met for a 3-day conference, the Real Utopia Project, which arranged international conferences to discuss and debate particular proposals, added even more depth and richness to Wright's work. Currently teaching sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also authored numerous significant books. To sum up, Wright argues that exploitation and class position are far more complex than either Marx or Weber. This class complexities explain why Marx predicted worker revolution hasn't occurred. There is less of sense of oppression and less actual oppression, which makes class conciseness less likely to develop. In addition, Wright aims to develop emancipatory social science, focusing on opposing human oppression and establishing a framework for fulfilling lives. He also emphasizes scientific understanding as the key to determining life prospects and investigate realistic utopian roots. Wright has also established academic groups devoted to enhancing human well-being. In addition, Wright aims to develop emancipatory social science, focusing on opposing human oppression and establishing a framework for fulfilling lives. He also emphasizes scientific understanding as the key to determining life prospects and investigate realistic utopian roots. Wright has also established academic groups devoted to enhancing human well-being. Let's talk about the concept and theory of analytical Marxism. It tackles the problem by emphasizing the scientific explanation of the analytical ideas of Marx, particularly to class. Actually, there are 4 qualities of analytical thinking, and those are: first, commitment to conventional scientific norms; second is emphasis on systematic conceptualization; third is explicitation of the steps and links between concepts within the theory; and last, importance given to the intentional actions of individuals.
Concept and theory specifying class. Wright's goal is to render Marx's concepts analytical. In contrast to Marx, Wright used the idea of much more complex and contains higher variability. Wright argues that exploitation is based on 3 criteria. Number 1, the inverse interdependence principle; 2, the exclusion principle; and 3, the appropriation principle. Sa tatlong criteria na yon, sa the inverse interdependence principle, exploitation occurs when material welfare of one class is causally dependent upon the material deprivation of one another. Sa exclusion principle, it depends on some property rights. Sa appropriation principle naman, is that how the people in different social class claim an ownership or even control things, resources, and assets. Rights argue that the ruling class or the capitalists claim wealth and power, often at the expense of the working class. To explain yung tatlong criteria, number one, the idea of the inverse interdependence theory. In theory and economics is on how the variables can have changes and effect on one another. Inverse interdependence, when one thing increase, other tends to decrease and vice versa. For example, in business, when a large company make changes like cutting or reducing employees or budgets, the company may save money, but it will lead to decreasing employee productivity and cause a lot of problems that affect the company. Sa exclusion principle naman, economics, the exclusion principle basically refer to a market competition. It depends on property rights, like in business. Two business owner cannot be exactly the same in place or location. Each business should be unique. Rights argues that capitalist societies, the people are not included from assessing a certain resources and then opportunities based on the hierarchy or their social class. And sa appropriation principle naman, yun nga lang, claiming ownership or even control things, resources, and assets. And ngayon, meron namang two important ramifications of exploitation. Number one, the welfare of the exploiter depends upon the effort of the exploited, not merely the deprivations of the exploited. Number two, expansion of exploitation is that together, the principles form a particular type of antagonist interdependence of material interest of actors with economic relations, rather than the injustice of those relations as such. To explain yung dalawang ramifications of exploitation, the welfare of the exploiter depends upon the effort of the exploited, and these situations may exist if exclusion principle varies. Some workers may participate in profit, give employees a part in decision-making, have an access to the means of production. The exploiter relies on the laborer, and on their efforts reflect the tension with the capitalist. Sa number 2 naman, this was inherent on Marx's formulation, but rights make it explicit. The relationship between workers and capitalists is not simply unjust by its nature. The capitalist depended on the workers is their source of power. Because capitalist dependence upon exploitation gets into higher wages. Now, doon naman tayo pupunta sa the middle classes. According to Wright, specifying the concept of exploitation allows us to see something Marx did not. There are groups of people who do not possess their own means of production. People who do in fact sell their labor, but they are not part of the working class. Wright identified 4 classes. 1. Capitalists, workers, managers, and last, petite bourgeoisie. Sila yung mga small business owners who do not have workers. Wright identified 4 classes. 1. Capitalists, workers, managers, and last, petite bourgeoisie. Sila yung mga small business owners who do not have workers. To further explain, Wright introduces 2 additional elements on Marx's idea of class. Number 1, the authority. 2, skills and expertise.
As a picture of Wright's class typology, Wright give as authority in the sense of the word capitalist, don't simply own the means of production, but also hire, train, and manage employees. Managers are part owner and part worker. Managers paid more than they earn. Another idea to describe is the skills and expertise to elaborate class positions. He adds this because knowledge and skills are all resources. In results, people with expertise and skills are to get a high wage just like a high-level managers. Adding these features to class typology, this model has a multiple class positions, mediated class positions, and social mobility. And now to summary, Wright makes concept more specific, more complex, and contains higher variability. Rights explicate three criteria of exploitation. Again, the inverse interdependence principle, the exclusion principle, and the appropriation principle. This principle allows us to see exploitation qualitatively and to see the relationship between the capitalist and the worker. Rights includes authority and skill and expertise to elaborate class position.
So for the theories digest, Daniel Bolotsky or Daniel Bell was born in poverty in the east side of Manhattan. He is a sociologist and his main question is how capitalism simultaneously promises and denies human hope. He wants to understand how the promise of hope can be fulfilled. His main argument is that society in the past was not fruitful for people to understand what truly is happening rather than a system. A society has three realms or three distinct and independent domains that has their own axis and structure specifically made for it, which means that a change in one does not mean a change to the other. According to Bell, the leading sectors of post-industrial economy are tertiary, quaternary, and quinary, and the more important occupations are professionals, technical, and scientific. Thus, the post-industrial economy is driven by knowledge and theory. So, in the concepts and theory or thinking society, in chapter 2, it is discussed what it means to think of society as a system. However, in this chapter, we will be talking about how society is under three domains and how these domains are independent of each other and how they affect or make the society function. If for Karl Marx, the economy determines the structures of society, for Bell, society is best understood as a set of three independent realms. The first one is techno-economic structure or TES, refers to the organization of production and the unequal distribution of goods and services. Thus, TES includes Marx's means and relations of production. Second, polity is not a social system. It is a set of laws and procedures that are used to create social justice and power. It specifies the legitimate use of force and regulates conflicts. Lastly, culture. Culture for Bell is specifically defined in terms of expressive symbolisms that seeks to explore and express the meanings of human existence in some imaginative form. So, as mentioned earlier, these three realms have an axis that does not work together. They don't necessarily affect each other. A change from one does not change the other. Change is different from each realm, and these differences are the source of tension and change in society in general. There are only certain periods when change in all three areas will occur at the same time. Those periods of time produce accidental yet powerful unity. The modernity period began when all the domains changed at the same time and in the same direction. Bell's theory is an analytical scheme that can be used to analyze an existing society or to describe how a society changed at some point in the past. So let us proceed to the characteristics of modern society. Bell also used the three domains as a characteristic to describe modern society. First one is TES. TES is the bureaucratic management and the hierarchy. In bureaucracy, tasks and interactions are rationalized in terms of means and efficiency. Each task is met in the same efficient and equal manner. Personal issues and emotions do not have a place in this. Overall, TES in modern society means the rhythm of change is linear and progressive. Second is polity. Polity is legitimacy. It is the moral or ethical basis for exercising power. And the condition given in modernity is the consent given by the governed. All people should have an equal voice in achieving consensus. The rhythm of change cycles between efficiency of oligarchy and equalities of democracy. Lastly, culture. It is the freedom to use expressive symbols that are responses to basic existential issues. For Bell, culture is a continuous process of sustaining identity. Therefore, culture is the realm of sensibility, of emotion and moral temper, intelligence. And so, culture in modernity is self-expression and realization. There isn't much change in this realm because it will always retain elements of the past. So, makikita natin na yung argument ni Bell or yung analytical scheme niya, hindi pinapakita rito yung kay Marx na economic determination or kahit yung balance system na sinasabi ng mga functionalists. Makikita na yung three dimension ay may kanya-kanyang characteristic. Yung TES, it deals with people formally as objects. Polity is equality and participation that is structured by democratic participation and representation. While culture, pinapahalagahan niya yung self-actualization ng bawat individual para sila ay maging authentic or maging buo.
Hi everyone, this is Nicolas and i-discuss ko yung concepts and theory na kung saan mapag-uusapan natin yung the decline of class. So, yan. An economy can be divided up into sectors that are defined, of course, by distance from the natural environment and yung tinatawag na proportion ng population ng ating society. So first, we have the primary sector and next is yung secondary sector. So pag-usapan muna natin yung primary sector. So primary sector, it is most directly involved in an organized attempt to extract raw resources from a, by and large, uncontrolled natural environment. So, the part of the economy that is most important is, of course, yung extractive such as agriculture, mining, fishing, and iba pang aspects. So, yon. Dito, yung tension ay nasa human beings and sa nature. Tension is between human beings and the nature. So, yon. This sector dominates during the pre-industrial phase of the modernity.
So next naman ay yung secondary sector na kung saan yung secondary sector ng economy ay nagme-manufacture ng finished goods. So dito, yung nature ay more dominated by machines. And yung mga goods na tinatawag natin ay pinoproduce ng mga semi-skilled workers laboring with, of course, the engine equipment. And the most important part of the economy is manufacturing and processing. So yung manufacturing and processing, dito naman yung sectors na nagpo-produce ng mga goods. And this is the industrial phase of modern society, that phase with which Marx was most concerned. So next naman is yung, yan. So in a post-industrial society, the leading sectors of the economy are tertiary. For example, yung transportation, yung next naman is yung quaternary. Dito papasok yung trade, finance, insurance, and so on and so forth. So, next is yung quinary, na kung saan dito naman yung health, education, research, ganyan, recreation, and syempre mga iba't iba pang aspekto. So yun, where the important jobs in pre-industrial society are such things as farmers and miners, and of course the semi-skilled workers and engineers that are vital positions in industry society. So alam naman natin yun na sila yung mga main actors, diba, and workers when it comes to industrial society. So yun, the significant economic positions in a post-industrial society are professional. For instance, yung medical, legal, and so on. So yun. Next naman yung technical na tinatawag natin na kung saan dito papasok yung software design, data management, at saka yung iba pang parang aspect. And lastly, yung scientific. So next, let's proceed naman to class and situs. So concurrent with the move to theoretical knowledge is a change in the significance of ownership. So sabi dito, Marx's class-based system is built upon the distinction between owners and workers. Increasingly, the ownership of large corporations varies as shareholders, the legal owners, sell and buy stock-based and speculation and portfolio management. So, after establishing a business, diba, yung entrepreneurs and founders generally sell their interests, leaving control of the operation to professional managers and investment brokers. So, dito, yung property relations ng class in the Marxian sense play less of a role in making social distinctions. Together, the emphasis on theoretical knowledge and the declining significance of ownership ay nagre-create ng economy na kung saan yung class ay nagiging less important than the statuses. So, yung word na situs ay nanggaling sa Latin na nangangahulugang place or site. Pero sabi ni Bell, or ginamit ni Bell yung word na situs para i-point out yung actual lossy of occupational activities and interests. So, yung point lang naman dito ni Bell ay yung class ay nagde-denote ng stable, structured position that is determined by one's place in an industrial economy. So, yun. Post-industrial economies, on the other hand, create social positions that are much more complex and cross-cut on another. For example, yung research scientist working for a university, it is in different position from a scientist working for example, yung Dow Chemical. So, yun. The site or yung situs na tinatawag natin of actual work for these two people is magkaiba, which is in turn ay nagkakreate siya ng different interests, economic standings, and social relationships. So, yun. Differences are created simply through status or yung scientist, or structure, which is yung university versus corporation. So, yun. There are also significant difference in knowledge, which is the gold standard of post-industrial society. Sa madaling salita, the Marxian notion of class and class consciousness is passé or tinatawag na out of date na kasi yung class position is less important than statuses. The idea of scarcity moves from material goods to issues of time and knowledge. So in industrial businesses, the key control problem is inventory management. So the issue is part of what forms Marxist business cycles of overproduction na kung saan yung inventory levels ay nag-i-exceed na sa demand. But with post-industrial society, the product is not materially based but rather a theoretical knowledge. So yun. Early market positions and high profits are based, of course, on discovering new technologies and applications. So, front-running corporations compete heavily for new graduates with indications of course, yung mga research inclined, mga ganyan. So, yun. Knowledge must not only be obtained, but it has to be controlled as well. Such things as non-compete agreements and intellectual property issues help guard the scarcity of product. The collapse of time has also impacted occupation, so yung meaning ng time as a natural entity has slowly been emptied since bago pa man natin ma-experience yung modernity or yung modernization. So, yun. The first step in this transformation was the invention of the mechanical clock, which was soon followed by institutionally established time zones. So, itong mga advances na to ay nag-aalaw ng mga tao to control time and to schedule events and actions over vast expansions of space as with, of course, the train travel and then the like. Yan. The form of time management held for quite some time. In the past, in the last few years, however, computer and internet technologies have further emptied time. We can now conduct business and communicate with people halfway around the world in real time. So in this, real time has taken on symbolic rather than natural meaning na nangangahulugan that we can communicate instantaneously with others who are perhaps living in another day or across the international date line. Ganyan. So, basically dito example natin yung sa America and dito sa Philippines na kung saan may difference, 'di ba, sa time natin. Kunwari dito 12 PM, sa kanila 12 AM pa lang nung kahapon sa atin. Yung mga ganun na example. So, next naman na i-discuss ko ay yung concept and theory na kung saan pag-uusapan natin yung polity and culture. So, post-industrial society is primarily a feature of the techno-economic structure, pero there are significant issues and challenges or changes in both polity and culture as well. So, yun. The primary issue confronting polity is the problem of scale, na kung saan yung society function reasonably well when there is a match in size or scope among the three realms. So the problem of post-industrial society is that the TES has grown exponentially through the globalization of the economy, and of course, the person is increasingly concerned with his or her individual rather than institutional life. So the result is that polity is either too small or too big. Yan. So laws, policies, and procedures at the national level are too small or adequately control and coordinate an economy that knows no territorial of time and boundaries. No territorial or time boundaries, rather. So yun, nations are too big to address the micro-level issues that arise in daily life. Culturally, we've seen that the strongest expressive systems ay makikita sa religion. So while the 5 major religions still exist, they've been institutionally dissented, and there are social forces na patuloy na pinupush para sa privatization of religion. And ina-argue naman ni Bell, or sinasabi ni Bell, that initially the modern idea of progress filled the psychic gap of the dissension of religion left. Pero yung belief na yon ay has come over the question in post-industrial society through this such things as threats of environmental catastrophes and political disenchantments. So yun, culture in general has lost its ability to answer existential issues due to continually expanding commodifications and advertising. So yun, increasing in this discretionary spending, mass media, and of course the emergence of new philosophies of doubt as well that have brought into questions the perfectibility of human nature. Yeah. The result is that post-industrial culture does not present a coherent and consistent point of view or moral conception of self. It can no longer sustain aesthetic identities or provide a roadmap for emotion, for moral temper, and for intelligence as well. So the question of how the self is to be realized is left to the individual who finds a culture based on hedonism, acquisition, and simulation. So moral authority is also individualized in post-industrial culture. Firm, institutionalized answers to the issues surrounding human life are replaced by individual anxiety, which is addressed through psychotherapy, counseling, pop psychology, and the self-help industry. In some ways, post-industrial society may sound a bit bleak. In early modernity, there was a belief in the grand narrative of progress and a hope centered in emancipatory politics. So post-industrial society has little of that. However, the future in post-industrial society is far from unpromising. First, what we see in the 3 realms of society are possibilities of change, rather than fairly clear and stable inroads for people to affect change, as there were in early modernity. Post-industrial society, by its nature of unpredictability, offers multiple ways of methods for a democratic participation. So as Bell stated, or as Bell argues, post-industrial developments promise men and women greater control of their social destinies. Pero this promise is conditional, as are all social opportunities. So the condition is based on the defining feature of post-industrial society na tinatawag na knowledge. So yung knowledge, according kay Bell, is intrinsically subversive. So data and information tend to stay in clearly defined boxes. So yon, theoretical knowledge, however, by definition, transgresses its boundaries. So knowledge specifically entails the ability to move from one context to another, the ability to redefine recognize, and create new perspectives and insights. So yung greater control in post-industrial society is only possible under conditions of intellectual freedom and open political institutions. The freedom to pursue truth against those who wish to restrict it. This is the alpha and omega of the alphabet of knowledge. Thank you.
So, to summarize this chapter, society consists of three distinct domains: the techno-economic structure, or TES, polity, and culture. Generally, these domains operate independently of each other, with society functioning as an interrelated system only occasionally. In the current era, the TES in particular has shifted from industrial to post-industrial, where tertiary, quaternary, and quinary sectors gain importance. This TES values knowledge and theory for innovation over production. Positions within the TES have shifted from class to statuses, which are status positions rather than class-based. Status refers to social positions hierarchically arranged based on honor or esteem, created and maintained through credentials, education levels, lifestyles, careers, or family traditions, with a focus on lifestyles. Scarcity transitions from distributional goods to positional goods, which are limited in number and carry social prestige. In post-industrial society, politics is hindered because the TES is too large to control, and individual concerns have become too personalized to govern. Culture is also handicapped due to commodification, mass media, and disenchantment, resulting in incoherence and a loss of ability to address existential questions. So for the next chapter, let us proceed.
Now we are going to talk about Pierre Bourdieu and his theory. So, sa theory ni Bourdieu, it is somehow similar sa perspective ni Marx na kung saan society is a place na nagkakaroon ng competition pagdating sa resources. Pero ang kaibahan naman ni Bourdieu kay Marx, sabi ni Bourdieu, mayroong 4 kinds yung capital as mentioned natin sa PowerPoint, namely economic, social, cultural, and symbolic. Dito nag-exist yung unequal distribution na dulot ng competition over scarce resources at iba pang instances katulad na lang ng misrecognition. So, later on, mas ma-expound pa yung details ng iba't ibang uri ng capital na nabanggit dito. Next, ayon kay Colquhoun, very significant yung naging contribution ng theory Bourdieu sa sociology of culture. Yung theory niya yung nakatulong para ma-view yung culture as embodied practices and characteristics sa bawat actions and preferences ng mga tao. Now we are going to briefly tackle the biography of Bourdieu. He was born on August 1, 1930 in Guingamp, France. Nag-aral siya ng philosophy, tapos after niya mag-aral, nagturo naman siya for 2 years. Then after that, he did empirical research na nakatulong na rin for his sociology. He published over 25 books. He is the founder and director of the Center for European Sociology, and he held the French Senior Chair in Sociology at Collège de France. Tapos, ayun, he died in Paris on January 23, 2002. So next, an invitation to think with Bourdieu is of necessity an invitation to think beyond Bourdieu, and against him were never required. So, ayun, since nakilala nga rin si Bourdieu for his intelligence and critical thinking that introduced knowledge especially in terms of culture and sociology, challenging his knowledge would require beyond his answers, especially sa field na to. So now, we are going to talk about the concepts and theory of structuring class. Dito, sinasabi yung pagkakaiba ng capital from wealth or income. When we say income, tumutukoy ito sa value ng pera na kinikita ng tao na kung saan may tuturing na kanilang wealth o kayamanan. Pero syempre, since tumutukoy nga ito sa value ng pera, it is considered as a measurable fact. On the other hand, when we say capital naman, according kay Bourdieu, it is more than the material assets as it defines your social life through the lens of cultural, social, economic, and symbolic. So, ayun, next. Tulad nga ng nabanggit kong kinds ng capital kanina, itong economic, social, symbolic, and cultural capital, ano-ano nga ba yung mga characteristics o paano nga ba natin ma-define yung mga uri na to? So, first, itong economic capital. For Bourdieu, it is one of the fundamental aspects of capital. Since nakabase ito sa wealth and income ng isang tao, maaaring mag-lead ito sa mga expectations na nakabase sa economic conditions ng bawat individual. It affects how individuals reflect on the notion that economic capital started and how they are going to deal with the class inequalities. Next is, ito namang social capital. It refers to the situation where you live in na kung saan somehow nade-define yung social class mo or at least yung how you interact with people who might be on a higher class. As quoted from the book, it isn't what you know but who you know that counts. Tinutukoy rito yung social connections na nabibuild ng bawat individual with each other as they interact or intentionally make social connections with people who have more power in the society. Kaya nabanggit din dito na hindi raw nade-determine ng economic capital yung social capital dahil nga dito sa social capital, you may intentionally build your connections with the powerful ones whenever you have the chance to do so. So, the third one is the symbolic capital. Dito naman nabanggit ni Bourdieu ang symbolic nature of class divisions. Ayon sa kanya, yung mga social groups daw ay hindi lang basta nabubuo dahil lang sa ginusto nila. Para kay Max Weber, nabubuo yung social group through technological conditions tulad ng pagre-recognize ng pagkakaroon ng leader, tsaka yung mga goal na sinaset nila or parang nakaset para sa society nila. Pero ayun nga, para kay Bourdieu, hindi naman niya totally na kinontradict, pero kinontradict yung sinabi ni Max Weber. Pero sabi niya, hindi sapat yung conditions na yon para ma-recognize o makabuo ng isang social group because for him, social groups must be symbolically recognized as well. Yung nagkakaroon ng pagkakakilanlan para mas ma-recognize yung social group na yon. So, next naman, when it comes to symbolic interactionism kasi, ito yung nakakabuo ng meaning yung mga tao sa actions and practices ng ibang social groups through face-to-face interactions na gaganap sa iba't ibang lugar. Nabanggit dito na symbolic power is a power of constructing reality, and it is simply because an equal symbolism also exists in this symbolic power, which depends on how we view the relationship that we have on the other person or social group. Example nito is yung symbolism na meron sa relationship between professor and student, kung ano yung karaniwang interactions na meron between them, and if we compare this relationship or interaction na meron yung professor with other professors or yung mga katrabaho niya, then there's a difference on interaction, but the person or the professor still carries the symbol that he or she embodies. Pero naiiba lang yung pag-view ng mga tao dito, depende sa kung sino yung nakaka-interact nila, which shows the power of constructing reality as an eye-opener on how interactions can be different based on the symbolic power that an individual carries. So, next naman, ito naman yung sa power of world making, which has two elements. The first one, the group must be recognized and symbolically labeled. Iyon, it pertains to the identity ng bawat individual. Katulad na lang ng halimbawa, scientists, doctors, lawyer, ganyan. At iba pa na kung saan parang yun yung nagiging symbol nila para ma-recognize nila or ma-recognize sila based sa function or purpose nila. Base na rin doon sa identity na nabuo nila. Sa second naman is yung symbolic efficacy depends on the degree to which the vision proposed is founded in reality. So next is cultural capital. Cultural capital, it defines our class based on the distinctions na nakikita sa paraan natin ng pakikipag-usap, pagsasalita, ganyan. Pati na rin yung mga actions natin sa iba't ibang situations na na-encounter natin, lalo na pagdating sa ibang lugar or social group na kung saan mas nagiging visible yung mga distinctions. Also, may impact din dito yung economic resources na meron yung bawat individual dahil nakaka-influence sa preferences nila, pati na rin sa ibang bagay na nakagawian nila yung mga bagong na-witness or na-experience nila as their economic resources grow. Next naman ay yung three kinds of cultural capital. Dito, binanggit yung objectified cultural capital na kung saan tinutukoy dito yung mga material goods tulad ng books, computers, and paintings. Tapos, yung sa institutionalized cultural capital naman ay yung mga certifications such as degrees and diplomas. Tapos, yung embodied cultural capital na tumutukoy naman sa taste or yung preference ng bawat tao. So now, we're going to tackle naman yung taste. Since yung taste nga is something that we embody because it signifies our preferences, naging way na rin ito to classify individuals kung saang social class sila nabibilang. Dahil syempre, as we interact with other people, doon natin nalalaman kung sino yung mga tao na mayroong preference na katulad ng sa atin. That becomes the way of classifying individuals kung saang social class sila nabibilang. When we say habitus naman, tumutukoy naman to sa mga actions na ni-execute na natin mismo. Unify nito ni Bourdieu as a significant part of one subjective experience because since we have our own preferences nga, it affects on how we physically reflect and respond on different situations or even on things na na-encounter or nadi-discover lang natin. So, yung next is yung the Dreyfus model kung saan ito yung ginamit isa to sa ginamit na analogy sa habitus na kung saan nag-indicate siya ng 5 levels to learning. First is yung novices na kung saan it refers to being aware of the rules and objective facts of a situation. Tapos next naman is yung advanced beginner kung saan one still have concrete knowledge but see it contextually. Competent performer na hierarchical decision-making skills, proficient performers na nag-aano naman siya ng another level of knowledge na kung saan tumutukoy sa first levels are based on cognitions. Tapos, yung final 2 levels naman ay yung knowledge na na-embody na ng isang individual. Tapos, next naman ay yung experts na work below the level of conscious thought or parang unconscious sila na expert sila sa mga bagay na yun or sa knowledge na yun. Tapos, in-indicate din dito or na-mention din dito yung 2 factors important in the production of habitus, which is yung education, tapos yung distance from necessity. Next is yung fields naman. Dito naman sa fields, ginamit to ni Bourdieu as an analogy para mas maintindihan yung concept ng empirical and symbolic and how it works. So, based on sa analogy, since yung field ay binubuo ng magkaibang group na pwede natin i-consider as the symbolization of different social class, people still end up working and struggling together driven by the same objective that they have since nakapailalim sila sa isang social class. Ayun, so since meron ng iba't ibang value and purpose yung capitals, the field still gives validity and function to the capitals dahil dito nagkakaroon ng interactions between people na may iba't ibang pananaw at nakagawian, but still yung symbolic field pa rin yung nagiging way para mas maging open yung bawat individual para mas intindihan yung pagkakaiba-iba ng mga tao.
According to Bourdieu, in every speech act and every action is an encounter between two independent forces. These are habitus and linguistic market. We'll explain first what a habitus is. Habitus ay ang kakayahan ng isang tao na magsalita kung saan mapapakita yung cultural capital. Cultural capital refers to the accumulation of knowledge and behavior na maaaring gamitin ng isang tao na kung saan mapapakita yung katayuan niya sa lipunan. While linguistic market is like any other market, it's a place of exchange and a place to seek profit. Exchange and profit are sought through linguistic elements such as symbols and discourses. Linguistic market is the capacity to communicate effectively while conforming to the goals and circumstances of the situation. It's the capacity to use language correctly in a way that is supported by the social structure of the language market, including appropriate vocabulary, syntax, register, tone, and body language. When people interact with one another, they perform speech acts, meaningful kinds of behaviors that are related to language. In a speech act, habitus and linguistic markets come together. So, ang example nito is, halimbawa, you're surrounded with professionals na nag-aaral ng history. And then, ikaw, as a history major, parang you feel at home. Yan siya. And another example of this is, halimbawa, magkakaroon ng graduation ng mga doctor. And of course, yung speaker is yung nasa field din ng medical. Parang same sila ng situation. Standard language comes as a result of the unification of the state, economy, and culture. Diba sa mga paaralan, universities, tinuturuan tayo kung paano yung proper writing of speech to widen our knowledge of standard language. The education system is used to impose restrictions on popular modes of speech to propagate the standard language. To explain the concept of symbolic violence, I'll give you an example. You're surrounded of higher social status and gusto mo siyang kausapin pero hindi mo magawa or hindi mo ginawa kasi you were afraid of making a fool out of yourself. Natatakot ka na baka mali yung masabi mo or hindi kayo magkaintindihan dahil magkaiba kayo ng estado sa buhay. A portion of the struggle takes place throughout the speech act or interaction. Nakita na natin markets with varying degrees or differentiation organize encounters, and habitus inevitably manifests itself in such markets. Sometimes we feel at home or we choose to silence ourselves, but we also need to remember that habitus is embodied and manifests as feelings gleaned in intuition. There are two ways to engage in a symbolic struggle. One is objective and the second one is subjective. Objective refers to an individuals or groups may act in such a way as to display certain counter realities. His example of this method is group demonstrations help to manifest the size, strength, and cohesiveness ng mga taong nawalan ng karapatan. Subjective, individuals or groups may try and transform the categories constructed by symbolic capital through which the social world is perceived. On the individual level, this may be accomplished through insults, rumors, and questions. Bourdieu is particularly interested in the transmission of class. Unlike Marx, Bourdieu believes that instead of explicit oppression, class is perpetuated by symbolic violence. Economic, social, cultural, and symbolic capital are the four categories of capital. Symbolic capital can establish advantages in both the subjective and symbolic domains. The distributions of the four capitals determine social positions, which are referred to as the objective field. Behavioral skills, routines, language proficiency, and personal preferences that our people possess due to their placement in the symbolic and objective domains are together referred to as cultural capital. Since cultural wealth is embodied, it is very significant. This also refers on how we adjust ourselves just to fit in a society or group sa paligid natin. Each of the capitals are weighted differently in linguistic markets. Different rankings on the capitals and the embodied ability to operate inside the market establish one's place within the market. Speech acts are where linguistic marketplaces are enacted. People predict different profits of differentiation by sensing how their habitus relates to the market. Symbolic violence arises from this unconscious sense. People justify the hierarchical relations between the, authority and class while also equally absolving themselves of responsibility for their actions when they are outcast. Dito na nag-uugat yung symbolic struggle, which involves symbolic disruption. Individuals or organization might take actions that enable them to envision other options in an objective manner. This is what people typically consider to be protests or movements of society. However, Bourdieu interprets these protests as representations due to how he recognizes the role that symbolic power plays in the reproduction of class. They are factual depictions of symbolic problems that append the accustomed ignorance of oppression must work within. Second, individuals and organizations have the ability to contest the inherent subjective significance in the symbolic domain. One might disturb the normalcy of the symbolic field in everyday speaking acts by asking concerns, making jokes, insulting someone, spreading rumors, and so forth. Reinventing history is another way that groups might contest the way things are.